The entire luxury department store froze when a sharply dressed manager pointed toward the entrance and shouted, "Take that dog outside right now." Every shopper turned. A decorated Army veteran stood silently beside a black German shepherd wearing a blue service dog vest. The dog never barked, never moved. It simply watched its handler with complete focus. The veteran calmly replied, "Ma'am, he's my medical service dog." "I don't care what you call it," the manager snapped. "Animals aren't allowed in my store." Several customers exchanged uncomfortable glances. One quietly lifted a phone and started recording. Security began walking toward the veteran. Then, the automatic glass doors opened. An Army general in full dress uniform stepped inside. He looked at the growing crowd. He looked at the veteran. Then his eyes settled on the perfectly disciplined service dog. Everything changed. If you enjoy stories where
He's
courage
trained to
defeats
help me with my
corruption
daily
and
tasks.
justice always wins, subscribe.
He
and
really
let's
is a
begin.
good worker.
Staff Sergeant Ethan Caldwell
We go
had
everywhere
spent
together.
20 years serving his country. Combat had left him with injuries that few people could see, but every day he faced those invisible battles with quiet determination. Beside him was Ranger, a highly trained German shepherd who had become far more than a companion. Ranger recognized anxiety before Ethan even felt it, creating space when crowds became overwhelming and helping him stay grounded during difficult moments. That Saturday morning, Ethan wasn't looking for attention, that he simply wanted to buy a birthday gift for his young niece before meeting his family for dinner. As Ethan entered the elegant department store, Ranger walked calmly at his left side, ignoring every distraction around him. Several shoppers smiled at the remarkably disciplined dog. A little boy whispered to his mother, "He's working." His mother smiled and nodded. But not everyone shared that understanding. Across the showroom floor, store manager Vanessa Whitmore noticed the pair almost immediately. Her expression hardened. She marched across the polished floor with determined steps. Without asking a single question, she stopped directly in front of Ethan. "Sir," she said coldly, "dogs are not allowed inside this store." Ethan answered politely, "This is Ranger. He's my trained medical service dog." Vanessa crossed her arms. "I've heard every excuse in the book." Ethan reached calmly toward his pocket, hoping to explain before the situation escalated. Vanessa interrupted him before he could say another word. "Either the dog leaves," she said loudly enough for nearby shoppers to hear, "or both of you do." Ethan took a slow breath. Years of military training had taught him that staying calm often accomplished more than raising his voice. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "Ranger isn't a pet. He's a trained service dog. Under federal law, he's allowed to accompany me." Vanessa let out a dismissive laugh. "Federal law?" she said loudly. "This is private property. I make the rules here." The nearby shoppers grew quiet. A few exchanged uneasy glances. Ranger remained perfectly still, sitting at Ethan's side with unwavering focus. His ears were alert, but he never barked or pulled on his leash. One elderly customer leaned toward another and whispered, "I've never seen a dog behave that well." Vanessa ignored the comment. Instead, she pointed toward the exit. "I'll ask one last time," she said sharply. "Take the dog outside." Ethan looked around the store. He could feel dozens of eyes on him, but he refused to let frustration show. "I came here to buy a gift," he said quietly. "I'm not causing any trouble." Vanessa folded her arms. The trouble walked in on four legs. A wave of uncomfortable murmurs spread through the crowd. Emily Carter, who had been shopping nearby, stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said. "That dog hasn't done anything wrong." Vanessa turned toward her. "This doesn't concern you, ma'am." Emily didn't back down. "It concerns everyone when someone is treated unfairly." Several shoppers nodded in agreement. Another customer raised a phone and continued recording. Realizing people were no longer supporting her, Vanessa waved toward the security desk. "Marcus," she called. Security Officer Marcus Hill walked over calmly. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked. Vanessa answered before anyone else could speak. "This man refuses to remove his dog from the store." Marcus looked at Ethan, then at Ranger. The German shepherd remained seated without moving an inch. Marcus had worked security for years. He had dealt with aggressive pets before. This dog was different. He quietly asked Ethan, "Sir, is this a service animal?" "Yes," Ethan replied. "He's trained to assist with my combat-related disability." Marcus nodded slightly. Before he could respond, Vanessa interrupted again. "I don't care what he says. Company policy is no dogs." Marcus hesitated. He knew company policy also required employees to follow federal law regarding service animals. Trying to avoid conflict, he spoke carefully. "Maybe we should contact the regional office before asking him to leave." Vanessa's face tightened. I'm the manager, she snapped. I don't need permission. The atmosphere became heavier with every passing second. A young girl, standing with her father, looked up at Ranger. He's such a good dog, she whispered. Ranger simply looked back at Ethan, waiting for his next command. Then, the store's automatic doors slid open with a soft mechanical hiss. A tall man, wearing a perfectly pressed U.S. Army dress uniform, stepped inside. Rows of metals reflected beneath the bright lights. Conversations stopped instantly. Even Vanessa turned toward the entrance. The officer walked slowly across the showroom floor, taking in the unusual silence. His eyes settled on Ethan, then on Ranger. Finally, he looked at the circle of customers surrounding them. His calm expression became serious. In a steady voice that carried across the entire store, he asked, would someone kindly explain why a decorated veteran and his service dog are being surrounded by security? The room fell completely silent. Vanessa swallowed hard. For the first time since the confrontation began, she wasn't the one in control, and no one spoke for several seconds. The silence felt heavier than any argument. General Robert Hawthorne stepped closer, his polished shoes echoing across the marble floor. His expression remained calm, but there was unmistakable authority in his eyes. Vanessa forced a confident smile. General, this is simply a store policy issue, she said. We don't allow dogs inside. The general looked at Ranger. The German shepherd sat perfectly still beside Ethan, never breaking focus. Then the general looked back at Vanessa. That, he said evenly, is not a pet. Vanessa crossed her arms. How can you be so sure? Without answering immediately, the general walked toward Ranger. He stopped a few feet away, careful not to distract the working dog. Ranger never moved. His eyes remained fixed on Ethan. The general smiled faintly. I've worked alongside military working dogs and service animals for more than 30 years, he said. You don't fake discipline like this. He turned to Ethan. Staff Sergeant Ethan Caldwell. Ethan straightened instinctively. Sir. The general extended his hand. It's good to see you again. Gasps spread through the crowd. Vanessa's confident expression faded. You know him? She asked. The general nodded. Know him? A quiet smile crossed his face. I remember the day he carried 2 wounded soldiers to a rescue helicopter while under enemy fire. The customers stared at Ethan in disbelief. Ethan looked slightly embarrassed. Sir, that was a long time ago. A long time ago, the general replied. Doesn't erase courage. The store became completely silent. Several people lowered their phones, listening carefully. The general continued. Many heroes never ask for recognition. He looked around the room. They simply go home and try to rebuild their lives. Then his eyes returned to Ranger. And sometimes they need a partner like this to help them do it. Ranger gently leaned against Ethan's leg, sensing the growing emotion. The general smiled. A perfect service dog. Emily Carter stepped forward. General, she said, he never caused any trouble. She pointed toward Vanessa. She refused to listen from the beginning. Another customer raised his phone. I recorded everything. So did I, another voice called out. Within seconds, half a dozen people admitted they had recorded the confrontation. Vanessa looked around nervously. This isn't necessary, she said. The general calmly replied. I believe it is. Security Officer Marcus Hill cleared his throat. For the record, everyone looked toward him. The veteran remained respectful the entire time. Marcus looked directly at Vanessa. The dog never barked, never approached anyone, never disrupted the store. He paused. I saw no safety issue. Vanessa's shoulders dropped slightly. The general folded his hands behind his back. In the United States, he said calmly, a trained service dog is protected under federal law. Businesses generally cannot deny access simply because they have a no-pets policy. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. Every word carried quiet authority. Vanessa opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. For the first time that afternoon, she realized she had completely misjudged the man standing before her. And now, an entire store had witnessed it. Vanessa looked around the store. Every customer was watching. Every phone camera seemed pointed in her direction. For the first time all afternoon, she appeared unsure of herself. Then another voice echoed from behind the crowd. What's going on here? The store owner, Richard Langford, had just arrived after receiving several urgent calls from employees. He immediately noticed the crowd, then the Army general, then Ethan and Ranger. His expression became serious. General Hawthorne briefly explained the situation. Richard listened carefully. As he did, several customers showed him the videos they had recorded. One after another, The footage told the same story every time. Ethan had remained calm. Ranger had behaved perfectly. Vanessa had refused to listen. The owner watched the final clip and slowly lowered the phone. The disappointment on his face was impossible to miss. He turned toward Ethan. Staff Sergeant Caldwell. The store became silent again. I owe you a sincere apology. Ethan nodded politely. You don't owe me anything personally, sir. Richard shook his head. Actually, I do. He glanced around the room. No customer should be treated this way. Then he looked down at Ranger. And certainly not a service animal performing its duties. The owner turned toward Vanessa. Please hand over your manager credentials. Vanessa's eyes widened. Richard, this isn't the time, he replied firmly. The crowd watched in complete silence as Vanessa slowly removed her manager badge. Moments later, another supervisor escorted her toward the office. No one cheered. No one celebrated. The situation felt bigger than a simple workplace dispute. It was about respect and accountability. After Vanessa disappeared from sight, Richard faced Ethan once more. I hope you'll give us another chance. Then he smiled. Everything you came here to purchase today is on the house. Ethan immediately shook his head. That's generous, but unnecessary. The general smiled, still as stubborn as ever. Several customers laughed softly. The tension finally began to break. Richard insisted, then at least allow us to help you find your gift. After a brief pause, Ethan agreed. The crowd responded with warm applause. Not because he had won, but because he had never stopped acting with dignity. Even when he was being humiliated. Even when he had every reason to lose his temper. Through it all, he had remained calm. And Ranger had remained faithfully by his side. A short time later, Ethan selected a necklace for his niece. As he approached the register, something unexpected happened. The young girl who had admired Ranger earlier walked over with her father. She looked nervous. Excuse me, sir? Ethan smiled. Yes. The little girl pointed toward Ranger. Thank you for bringing him. Ethan knelt slightly. Why's that? She smiled. Because now I know service dogs are heroes too. For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. The general quietly watched from across the store. A proud smile appeared on his face. Because that simple moment mattered more than any argument. More than any policy. More than any public apology. Someone had learned something important. Someone would remember. As Ethan prepared to leave, General Hawthorne walked him to the entrance. Outside, the evening sun painted the parking lot in shades of gold. The general stopped and faced him. You know, he said, most people would have exploded in there. Ethan looked down at Ranger. Ranger helps with that. The general laughed. Looks like he's still protecting soldiers. Ethan scratched behind Ranger's ear. Every day, the general then did something that surprised everyone watching through the store windows. He raised his hand in a formal military salute. A salute not just to a veteran, but to a man who had carried his honor with him long after the uniform came off. Ethan returned the salute. Neither man said another word. They didn't need to, because respect speaks for itself. As Ethan and Ranger walked toward the setting sun, customers standing near the entrance quietly stepped aside. Some thanked him for his service. Others simply nodded. But every one of them understood something they hadn't understood before. Honor isn't found in rank. It isn't found in power. And it certainly isn't found in the ability to control others. Honor is found in character, in humility, in courage, and in a willingness to stand for what's right even when nobody else does. Ranger walked proudly beside Ethan as they disappeared into the evening light. And somewhere behind them, an entire store would remember that lesson for years to come. True honor isn't measured by the medals someone wears. It's measured by the respect we show when nobody is watching.